Saints fans and Who-Dats from all over the world. It's time for the Bayou Blitz. With your host, Bob Rose.
Good evening, boys of New Orleans Saints Nation. I hope everybody is doing well this evening. I know we've had a busy week and we have a lot, but I thank you all for tuning in with us. Thank you also for queuing us in, Mr. Kyle Mosley. How are you tonight, sir?
I am doing well, Bob. How are you doing, my friend?
Oh, I'm good. We know it's been a busy week in New Orleans Saints Nation, both on the good and the bad. Into football again this weekend, as the New Orleans Saints will start their rookie mini camp 11th through the. And that's our special guest tonight is Mr. Sean Williams, host of the Dome and for Pro Football Spot. So we're looking forward to having him call in a few minutes. But real quick, Kyle, what is...
Hey, Bob, we're kind of losing you there.
What are some of the tweets?
I'm sorry, Bob. We kind of lost you there with your audio. Say that one more time.
Can you hear me now?
One more time.
Are you about now?
Okay, yeah. It's just going in and out. I apologize, guys, but these things happen when you're live.
Well, we can blame it on a government chip that we had at birth or something like that. We can really get the conspiracy fires going.
Think about it. Look, we've had earthquakes in the Gulf of Mexico. We have had volcanoes erupting all over the place, and we now have Donald Trump getting guys released from North Korea. So, I mean, crazy things have happened all around the world today.
Yeah, why not mess with the Bayou Blitz on top of everything else, right?
There you go. Okay.
What are your impressions about what has happened with the New Orleans Saints in particular this week? The two biggest pieces of news. Early in the week, the Saints released tight end Coby Fleener, designated him for release after 2 years, two somewhat disappointing years with the team. And then, of course, yesterday's big from the NFL making it back suspended for the first 4 games season for violating the league substance abuse policy. Some of your feelings on that?
Well, the first thing about Coby Fleener is such a big loss, not as far as production wise, as far as his potential. That's what I should say, Bob. You know, a lot of potential was seen in Coby Fleener, and the Saints also lost a lot in investing in that contract as well, man. When you look at Coby Fleener, and a lot of people thought, especially the Saints organization, believed he was going to be the heir apparent to Jimmy Graham, and when they traded him to Seattle Seahawks organization, you just thought more of Coby Fleener was going to happen. But I wasn't too surprised, in my opinion, Bob, because when you looked at Indy and it came down to the end of his contract, why didn't they try to sign him if, Andrew Luck needed a tight end or some sort of safety valve? What was it about not getting him on board or keeping him in their fold, I should say, was the issue there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, not only, I think Coby had spent 3 or 4 years in Indianapolis to begin his career, but a lot of people forget that he was teammates with Andrew Luck coming out of Stanford, and they drafted both in the same year. So, I mean, those two guys went more than a few years back. And to be honest with you, to your point, I wondered myself why wasn't Indianapolis there with the talents of Kobe because they did not make a fight at all to keep him because he was on the free agent market for even a couple days, if memory serves, before the Saints made him a contract offer.
Right. And Kobe is one of those finesse players, man, and he wasn't a great blocker, and the Saints released Jimmy because he wasn't a great blocker, right? But I didn't see where Kobe was that much of an upgrade, especially when Benjamin Watson, the year prior to that, played an outstanding game for the Saints that year. I don't know, man. And you look at the Saints tight ends, they have been kind of underperforming for a while now. Josh Hill, sometimes you get him, sometimes you don't, right? And it's just who's going to be the more consistent guy, man? And that's why Benjamin Watson that year was such a great fill-in for the Saints. Of course, he was behind Jimmy those years as well, but it's just a perplexing situation with Coby Fleener because he is a talented young man. You can see the potential is there, but also Bobby Aber brought up a good point. After that concussion that he sustained in the game, that next series when he was coming back into the game, you could tell he didn't want to catch the ball, man. he wasn't there. So, and concussions have been career enders for a lot of players in the National Football League.
Very true. I mean, it's a problem that the NFL has obviously been trying to address a lot more closely in recent seasons. And injuries obviously are nothing to mess around with. I know, we kind of joke about it from time to time when we're talking amongst ourselves here. Maybe up to the head or something like that. But it is a serious issue. Football is a very physical sport, and we already know some of the long-term health problems that retired players have had, and brain injuries are certainly near the top of that list. But you're right. I mean, Kobe seems like a very nice young man. He does have a lot of talent to bring to a football team. His skill set just didn't necessarily fit in with what Sean Payton wanted to do with that New Orleans Saints offense. And the point that you made when they traded away Jimmy Graham and Benjamin Watson stepped in and had really an outstanding season, surpassed many people's expectations. But then they let Watson walk in free agency to turn around and bring Fleener in. And it was a contract that a lot of people felt that New Orleans overpaid a little bit, which was a head scratcher also, because if he's bringing the same skill set as Jimmy Graham did to the table, only Graham is better at it, and you trade publicly stating necessarily like the contract that you were paying out to Graham. Well, when you pay a similar contract to a player that's admittedly not as good, it does make you scratch your head a little bit about the personnel move.
Yeah. And look, man, you look around the whole league, the tight end position can be a hit or miss position for a lot of teams. And when you really get a good find at tight end, do you want to keep on trying to hit and miss, right? You look at a guy like Jason Witten, all of those years with the Dallas Cowboys, 15 years. You look at Gonzalez, his tenure in the league with Kansas City, then with the Falcons. And now you look at what's happening with your boy out there in San Diego getting cut. Could he become a New Orleans Saint? And you just don't know if a reunion with Drew Brees, especially at the latter part of his career, we already have a guy like that in Benjamin Watson at the latter part of his career, right? So, I mean, I'm interested to see what these undrafted free agents are going to do, and if they can become the contributors at tight end that we need in the Saints system.
Yeah, I am too. And you brought up a great point about Gates. We had Mr. John Hendricks, editor of Canal Street Chronicles, on as our special guest last week, and that was one of the things that John had mentioned about potential moves as the Saints get into or near training camp, is that a reunion with Antonio might be possible. But like you said, I mean, Gates is on the latter end of his career, can probably still bring something to a football team, but you already have that kind of skill set, in my opinion, in Ben Watson. And he's just as Gates was in San Diego. Ben Watson is a trusted target for Drew Brees to go to in key situations. So I don't know if that's necessarily a major upgrade at this stage of both guys' career. And I'm kind of excited and interested to see what the undrafted free agents, they signed 3 of them at the tight end position to begin competing for spots at the onset of their rookie minicamp this weekend. And I know Barry Hurst for the Saints News Network did a feature story on Deion Yelder from Western Kentucky, and I just released a piece. It was either yesterday or the day before on Cam Serenier from Wake Forest. Sorry about that. And we have Nate Wozniak coming in, a really big young man out of the University of Minnesota. Those guys all bring some interesting skill sets to the table, and it's always unwise to count on the contributions of undrafted free agents because they weren't drafted for a reason. But at the same time, I feel like whatever that they bring to the table is kind of gravy on top of your meal, because again, we've talked about Ben Watson, we've even talked about the possibility of bringing in Antonio Gates, and you already have Josh Hill here, all of which Drew Brees knows, all of which Sean Payton knows, and they already are a puzzle piece to the New Orleans Saints offense. So therefore, an undrafted free agent, they're going to have time to learn and develop if they have the kind of skill set that Peyton and offensive coordinator Pete Carmichael feels like that they could really contribute to the Saints offense.
Definitely. And, Nate Wozniak, I used to watch that kid from time to time down here in Texas. I don't know why we got a lot of the University of Minnesota games, but he was a pretty good little tight end for those guys. I mean, look at his size, 6'10", 280. Oh, my goodness. That's huge, man.
It makes you wonder if he's being brought in for a dual package to play with the New Orleans Pelicans when next NBA season starts too.
Yeah, definitely. We could use some bigger bodies out there, especially since we don't know what's going to happen with Boogie's contract situation with the Pelicans. Well, we got Sean on board with us, man. What's going on, Sean? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Am I coming through okay with you guys?
Oh, man, you loud and clear.
You're coming through great on this end. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Sean Williams.
Before we go any further, first and foremost, Kyle, it's an honor to finally get to meet you somewhat. We've run in some of the same circles, and nothing but respect for you. But Mr. Rose, for all you guys that are fans of the Bayou Blitz, I have to, for lack of a better way, I'm Bob's big brother from another mother, and I got to tell you, I'm a writer. I've covered the Saints for going on 5 or 6 years. I was a songwriter. I was a creative writer. I've been a writer most all of my life. And even as a writer, I don't have the words to adequately express just exactly how proud I am of Bob Rose. He's the unofficial third member of the Under the Dome podcast, and we're kind of like the Southern Mafia. We don't let just anybody in. But Bob's very close to my heart, and I'm both humbled and very, very honored to be asked to be a guest on your show, man. I'm so proud of you, and thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you, Sean, for joining us and for those kind words.
Yeah.
Sean and Kyle, you guys are in a very small circle of people that have helped me so much in my 2 years up to this point, and hopefully I got many more in front of me. But you guys have laid the path for me, and hopefully I'm learning from the best because you guys have meant so much to me.
Yeah. Well, look, Bob, you're doing a great job. You've always done a great job being an analyst on the Crescent City Connection. But, Sean, I want just to say this, man. Thank you. It's an honor that you're here. And, I supported you guys from day one when you guys went live with the video blog and the podcast for Under the Dome. John Pinto, that's my boy, and Alan.
I got to say this real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Kyle. John Pinto is the unsung hero of what we do.
Yeah.
He does so much and asks absolutely nothing in return. He just, it means that much to him to be a part of what we're doing, and John Pinto is a godsend for the things that we've been trying to accomplish with Under the Dome.
Yeah,
and he's another one of the members of the family.
Yeah. Well, look, I tell you this much, man. John goes way back with me because John used to ask questions on Saints News Network, and he would ask questions in the fan page, right, on Facebook. But you can never get him on the air. John, come on the air.
I have tried.
He would never get on.
A lot of people don't know this about Under the Dome. In the initial stages, before the lineup was solidified with Alan and I approached John Pinto. I said, look, I need a co-host. He said, I'll help you look.
Oh,
I said, no, dude, I'm talking about you. He said, the best thing that I can do for you is I'll help you look.
Yeah. But you know what? You got to love John because he's a die-hard black and gold. Die-hard who that?
Yes, he is.
Die-hard. Way up there in the cold in New York. So, yeah. I love John, man. Is that where? I thought he was in New York.
He is in Maine.
Maine. Ooh,
yeah.
Ooh. Well, look, that's cold and not too much up there in Maine. Tell you that much. I know that firsthand. But but John is my boy, man. And anything you guys need, let us know. We're always there to support you guys. And I told Bob this, and as well as a couple other guys. When we had the idea when we started Saints News and Saints News Network, it wasn't that we wanted to be exclusive and exclusivity and all this other stuff. It's about being who-dats and fans, and we're fans
That's
first.
Right.
We love our team, so we need to support one another.
Absolutely. The thing, and I think that Bob can attest to this, because Bob's basically been right beside me the entire way, thank God, with Under the Dome. And one thing that I believe in, I compete with myself. If there's any competition whatsoever between one side and another, it should be on the field,
right,
by the Saints.
Right.
There's room enough for all of us and everything that we do. If you are blessed with the opportunity to have a platform to do what we do, then it is incumbent on you to pay that forward.
Exactly.
So to speak.
Exactly.
And one of the things that has meant the very most to me with Under the Dome, we've been really blessed. We've had Kyle Turley, Joe Horn, Tyrone Hughes, and our big draft show a couple of weeks ago, we had Arthur Millette as a guest, and we have several that I'm working on right now. It's just a matter of nailing down the specifics. But even more so than having players or former players on there, one of the things that means the very most to me is the guys like Bob Rose, the guys like Tyler, Raymond, the guys that came on with us when they were getting started, and they went on to do their own thing. I selfishly feel like maybe I played a small part in that, and to be able to be influential in what these guys are doing, there's absolutely nothing that means more to me than that.
Awesome. Look, Bob, I know Sean and I just hijacked the show, but I just wanted to say, hey, man, I love what you guys are doing. Keep doing it. We support you. We're
Thank
right
you
there
so
for you.
much, Kyle. Coming from you, that's an incredible compliment.
No
And
problem,
I very
man.
much appreciate it.
No problem. Let me know if I can ever be a guest. I'm here.
Hey, I've tried to get you before. We
Yeah.
just never could work out the logistics on it.
Yeah. Well, look, you don't
I
want
can't book
you don't
it
want
right
my
now.
face
I'll be
on
busy.
there. You just want my voice, right?
Oh no. If I've got to put the teeth in and dress up, so do you.
Oh, well, okay. All right, my friend. All right. Just let me know, okay? All right, Bob. Back to you, Bob.
Well, first of all, I will lay witness to the fact that you, Kyle, have just agreed to go on Under the Dome.
Okay.
And,
Okay. I don't have to get it in writing. I have a witness.
Hey, this can be edited.
Forgot about that. Okay, we're going to need a live caller to say that they bore witness to this conversation.
No.
Yeah, right. Start texting in the show line now, and just get yourself on paper.
Oh, my goodness. Hey, guys, I forgot to do this. If you guys want to call in and talk to Shauna as well as Bob Rose, you can call 504-533-8444. That's 504-533-8444.
Sounds good to me. Sean, when Kyle and I first started tonight, we were talking about, obviously, there's been two huge pieces of news that involve the New Orleans Saints this week. And we'll get to Mark Ingram in a minute because there's a lot to cover there. But real quick, and I know you addressed both issues on your show last night, but we were talking about Coby Fleener and his release and what that means for the Saints tight end position, particularly coupled with the re-signing really, of Benjamin Watson. How do you see the Saints tight end position as they near training camp?
To be honest with you, Bob, unlike a lot of people, I'm not inching ever closer to the deep drop off of the ledge when it comes to the tight end position for the New Orleans Saints for really two reasons. First and foremost, first of all, I don't think that given the state of the offense at this time, that the Saints are nearly as dependent on the tight end position as they once were. I mean, if you think about it, you look back as far as Jimmy Graham. What did Jimmy Graham have on that offense besides he and Breeze at that time? There was no running game to speak of. There was Mark Ingram, but you had issues on the offensive line. You had Ingram fairly green in terms of being a all-purpose running back. He had not quite come into his own at that point, and you were looking at Drew Brees to be a 5,000-yard passer every season because he had to. That was basically your calling card. And in terms of the receiving core, you had Graham and an aging Colston, and that was pretty much it. You needed Jimmy Graham to be what Jimmy Graham was for this offense to do anything. I mean, as much as I love the guy, how many times during that period did we see Drew Brees roll out to his right and throw into triple coverage towards Jimmy Graham, get picked, and then the next series do the same thing. Only not get picked, complete it for a touchdown. As far as the tight ends go now, I think looking at it kind of as a big picture, I think that cutting Fleener was probably the right move to make because it's obvious that something's wrong. Emotions on and opinions on Fleener run the gamut last season. You had the first thing that comes to my mind anyway is the Washington Redskins game. An incredible comeback, an edge of your seat, emotional roller coaster ride of a game. You don't win that game without Coby Fleener, but
right.
Once the emotion and the excitement of that wears off, and you look at the overview, Fleener's been here. He's 2 years into a 5-year deal, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, he's 2 years on a 5-year deal, and he has averaged over his 2-year career with the New Orleans Saints, he's averaged 2 catches a game. Now, if you're talking about the tight end position being such an integral part of what you're doing, you're going to need more than that out of your number one tight end. He can't block. Well, tight ends in New Orleans, if they want to block in tight end, they've got who, man? You've got Josh Hill that can throw a shoulder into somebody before he runs a route. They didn't really bring Fleener in here to block, just like they didn't have Jimmy Graham to block. I don't read too much into that blocking, no blocking. You have specific player packages for what it is, that you're going to do. But the bottom line to me, looking at the whole big picture, is the guy that you signed to a 5-year deal and that, in my opinion, we drastically overpaid for to get from the Indianapolis Colts. In 2 years, he averaged 2 catches per game, and that's for what we're paying for the guy. That's just not going to cut it. You take that hit. It's in a lot of ways. I maybe not the same level of money, but I equate it with the C.J. Spiller thing. When we cut C.J. Spiller, I did the math on it, and it averaged out to several, like 80, 70, 80, I can't remember the exact figure, $80,000 per play that he was on the field as a New Orleans Saints, what we paid him. And then we cut him and we took that cap hit. But, I mean, it was kind of a catch-22 because what were you going to do, keep paying him for nothing? I don't think Fleener developed into what they thought he was going to. It's been well publicized that he struggled to understand the playbook. And, issues like that aren't going to go away. If you struggle to understand the playbook when you get here, okay, we'll allow you a learning curve. But 2 years into the process and you're still struggling, I don't think that's going to improve in the next 3 years if we keep you. So I believe that cutting Fleener was the right decision to make. Now, as far as Ben Watson goes, you got to look at it for what it is. It's and I hate this analogy because it diminishes Ben Watson's role, but Ben Watson is a Band-Aid on a headache. He's going to come in, and you don't have to worry about him developing a chemistry with Drew Brees. We saw 2 years ago exactly what Brees can accomplish and what Watson can do with Brees. You don't have to worry about rebuilding that. But you're not going to get a 4 or 5 year run out of Watson. That's just not what this deal was about. I firmly believe you brought Watson in to stave off having to spend an early round draft pick on a tight end and allow you to go in a different direction with this year's draft. I think that's basically the crux of what Ben Watson was brought in for.
Yeah, and you bring up that is a great point. John Hendricks, when he was on with us last week, mentioned the possibility of bringing in the Saints bringing in a veteran, and he specifically mentioned Antonio Gates, mainly because not only does Gates still have some left in the tank, it seems, but he is also very familiar with Drew Brees, having played in San Diego, the two having played in San Diego together for, I believe, 3, maybe 4 years. Do you see the Saints possibly going that direction, bringing in an established veteran to kind of help with support Watson? Because Watson is towards the end of his own career, maybe a Gates or even a Julius Thomas, certainly more of a pass-catching tight end. But do you see the Saints potentially going that direction?
I think that it's absolutely possible. I do believe that it would be more prudent for, of course, that means that they'll probably go in the complete opposite direction now. I think that it would probably be better business. See what you have coming in with these undrafted free agents. If I'm not mistaken, there's 3. And I'll let you pronounce the guy whose name starts with S. You did such a good job on that earlier.
Well, thank you. His name is Cam Serenier. He comes from Wake Forest. And the other 2 that you mentioned, big pass-catching target from Western Kentucky, Dion Yelder. And and an even bigger kid from Minnesota, Nate Wozniak. We were talking a little bit about them.
Yeah, Wozniak fits the prototypical quote unquote, and I'm doing the air quotes here, the prototypical New Orleans Saints tight end. You want a huge guy that looks more like he's built for jumping and getting a rebound on a basketball court than he is running pass patterns. Wozniak fits that bill, being, what was it, 6'10"?
I think so, yeah.
Yelder is the only one that I really have knowledge of because being a season ticket holder for Louisiana Tech University, Bulldogs, I got to see Yelder play in person, and he's impressive. He's not and Alan Ulrich, please forgive me, but he's not a Jimmy Graham type. When he comes in the game, okay, they're fixing to throw the ball. He was a decent blocker. He wasn't Kellen Winslow, and I mean Kellen Winslow Sr., not Kellen Winslow Jr. Kellen Winslow of the San Diego Chargers. Let me put it that way. He wasn't a throwback, all-around tight end type, but he could do well enough to ensure that you couldn't key off of him, if that makes any sense. You weren't able to say, okay, he's in the game, that means that this kid's fixing to throw the ball. He could hold his own on any play that Western Kentucky chose to run. So, in Serenier, did I get that right?
Yeah.
Serenier, I'm not real familiar with. I've heard good things about him. I haven't gotten to watch any tape on him yet. But I think if there's, to answer your initial question, I think if there's going to be a fallback plan such as a Antonio Gates or a Julius Thomas, I think that you might not see that until after maybe OTAs and possibly even in training camp to see what they have to work with. And you can't forget, you still have on roster with the expanded training camp number of 90, you still have seasoned veterans in Josh Hill, Ben Watson, Who Man, that have all been, while maybe not Hall of Fame worthy. They've all been dependable, though oft injured. It's a toss up. I could see it going either way.
Well, and you had talked about the way the New Orleans Saints typically like to use the tight end position now, and folks, back that up too. Sean and I have had numerous conversations off air about this as well. But if you look up the New Orleans Saints statistics from when Sean Payton first came on board in 2006 up through last year, and you throw out those productive, those prolific years from Jimmy Graham, take a look at what the tight end position has done every other year. You usually get 500 or 600 yards from them. And the reason is because Peyton and Breeze, during their time here, they do like to use the other weapons on the field, which segues us perfectly into the biggest New Orleans Saints news of the week and of the off season, really, is the league announcing yesterday that Pro Bowl running back Mark Ingram has been suspended for 4 games due to violation of the NFL substance abuse policy. What was your first reaction when you heard that news, Sean?
To be totally honest, the very first thought that went through my mind was thinking back, and I alluded to this on our show last night. The very first initial reaction that went through my mind when I got that update was thinking back to Willie Snead a year ago and him being suspended for the first 4 games of the season and how that turned out with him. You're looking at Ingram. Well, first and foremost, he's in a contract year. Mm-hmm. And looking at the big picture, as much of fans as we are, the thing that people like Bob and Kyle and I, the things that we have to remind people of repeatedly on a daily basis is, to you and I, this is entertainment. This is all. This is what we do to unwind and to get away from our world. This is a business, first and foremost. Alvin Kamara was brought in a year ago. Yeah, they're tight, they're buds, but don't fool yourself into thinking that Alvin Kamara was not brought in, especially given Offensive Rookie of the Year, the incredible season that he had. Don't think for a moment that Alvin Kamara is not being groomed to be Mark Ingram's replacement. And these guys are pros. They know how the business works. They know what's what. And Mark Ingram is probably well aware of that. They may be boys. They may take pictures together on Instagram at Pelicans games. They may go together every week and be on Dion's phone chat, whatever that stuff was. But when it comes right down to it, sooner or later, it's going to come down to a choice between Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. Now, that being said, I don't think that time is now. And that has absolutely nothing to do with Mark Ingram's impending suspension. I don't think that that's going to affect how the Saints handle this transition. If you look back over the history of the Saints, when Deuce was here, we brought in Reggie Bush. Mm-hmm. They have never waited until a running back has left to replace him. It's a shame that they haven't done that with quarterback, but that's another time for another story. As far as Ingram goes, I think that this is. I have felt for years that there should be something in place. Now, I'm sure that in their minds there is. There should be something in place for lack of, and my wife and I talked about this morning, for lack of a better word or phrase to use, a compliance officer for every team in the National Football League. If you want to play for us, part of your contract, we will not pay you unless you abide by this rule first and foremost. You don't take a drink, you don't take a pill, you don't take a supplement that does not go through this compliance officer. And it's his job to be up to date on every banned substance, everything that may even remotely be questionable, and not put a team such as the Saints in the position that they're in right now where, well, he took a substance that you got to have a waiver for, and he didn't have the waiver in place. You know, this is sad. It's unfortunate, but, anytime you have these loopholes and ways to get around it, it's always going to be this. There needs to be more clear-cut boundaries established and ways put in place for these teams to be more compliant with these boundaries.
Well, Sean, they have that, and I'm not trying to. How do I say this, guys? Look, the player personnel guy for the Saints, that he's possibly that ex-NFL player and the assistant to those guys. They educate these guys every year on what to do, how to comply, what to check for. The list goes on and on and on. They sit in meetings. The veteran guys know what to do. So that's why it's a head scratcher to me sometimes where you hear where I didn't know. What you mean you didn't know?
And it seems like every year the list continues to grow. That's the reason that I say, if they have this plan in place, it's not getting it done. You have these people in your organization that tell these players, hey, if you beat your wife, you're not going to get paid. Well, that's kind of somewhat, it's still out there, it's still prevalent, but not as much so as it used to be. These guys depend on taking care of their bodies. And it seems like this time of the year, every year, there's this player or that player. Now, you also have these guys that are out in the park at 2:00 in the morning smoking crack and everything else. You have those guys, they're going to break the rules. It doesn't matter what you put out there, Josh Gordon. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. But you also have these guys, and I firmly believe, you can call me a homer if you want to, there is absolutely nothing about Mark Ingram, the several years that he's been a New Orleans Saint, that I've followed his career. There's absolutely nothing about this young man that leads me to believe that he in any way tried to skirt the rules, tried to get around the rules and get a competitive advantage, which, let's face it, by definition, PEDs are to give you a competitive advantage, theoretically. I don't see Mark Ingram as being that guy, but at the same time, he tested positive for a substance that they don't allow. So, unfortunately, he gets lumped into that category because of that.
Yeah, but one other thing we need to look at, guys, is the fact that, and this is something that Bobby and Christian brought up on today's WWL show, the Saints were shopping him around.
You see, I've heard that
they were shopping him
through
around.
The rumor mill. And I, to be totally honest with you, I really have a hard time believing that, Kyle. Well, I really do.
And it could be plausible, and it may not be plausible, but why? But usually where there's a little smoke, there's some fire setting off somewhere, right? And
absolutely.
These guys knew that Mark Ingram's final year, he just changed his agents He wasn't satisfied with the last contract that was negotiated by his previous agent, Saga and those guys. So now he has a new agent. So there's something else going on, because remember last year you brought up Snead. Even though Snead knew he was going to be suspended, Snead was still there at the voluntary workouts. He still was there inside the organization's facilities. Mark Ingram has not been there.
And that's the thing.
Something is going on.
That news was leaked out. Because the first time I had heard that the Saints were perhaps shopping Ingram around was from our friend Ian Rappaport on the NFL Network. And I bite my tongue a lot when it comes to Mr. Rappaport's reporting. But since
every time I read a report from Ian Rappaport, I have this diagram that I use where I have two dice, kind of like I'm playing Monopoly, and I roll the dice, and then I see how to interpret what Ian Rappaport says.
But I mean, like, but like you just said, Kyle, sometimes where there's smoke, there is fire, and now there are some more reports that are coming out there that have at least supported that, where the Saints have, quote-unquote, looked into it. Now, that could be nothing more than just the organization calling up a team or two that might be running back needy and say, hey, what would you give up for Mark Ingram? Or they answer their own phone from inquiries from other teams. Hey, is Mark Ingram for sale, and what do you want for him? Yeah, it could be just a general conversation like that. Now, until you guys just brought up the fact, just reminded me of the fact that Mark had changed agents last year, I honestly wasn't too worried about the whole, he wants a new contract. Well, guys, of course he wants a new contract. His current contract...
Everybody wants a new contract.
Right. And his current contract was up at the end of this season. So rather than play out a lame duck deal, of course you're going to want to negotiate a long-term deal. The timing of it was a little bit of a head-scratcher because guys, we know that they knew this suspension was coming long before it was ever announced.
Yes.
But also the biggest problem I have with Mark is his actions in not being around the team and the team facilities, like you pointed out, Kyle. Sean, what would that say to you if you were a teammate in that Saints locker room, that your guy just isn't around, and then this news comes out?
Well, now you have to stop as big a for lack of a better, I keep saying that, but for lack of a better term to use, as big a control freak as Sean Payton was, I would have to know beyond a shadow of a doubt before I make that judgment on Ingram if that was by design from Sean Payton or not. Because they very easily, this is kind of like the preseason. You know what Ingram's bringing to the table. You know what you're getting with him. It's not really that crucial that you have him in there. Not so much as a Edmonds or a Boston Scott or, fill in that blank there. And before I would read any too much into, if I was a teammate, to more appropriately answer your question, if I was a teammate, that would concern me. Now, I would be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt in terms of why. Or I would want to. There again, the character of Mark Ingram, I wouldn't nominate him to go on Mount Rushmore or anything like that. But I do believe that Ingram is one of those guys like your Cam Jordan, your Drew Brees, maybe. He is an ultimate teammate, and by that, I think that he earned that designation with the way that he handled the entire Alvin Kamara thing last year. You never saw the slightest grumble. Never saw anything negative in the press at all whatsoever. And, by the end of the season, if you think about it, by the end of the season, Kamara was getting more touches than Ingram was.
That's very true. And if we're looking at the Saints without Ingram, moving on without Ingram for at least the first 4 games of the season, which, real quick, guys, the first 4 games will open up against Tampa Bay, then the following week at home against Cleveland, then a big one at Atlanta in week 3, and then you're on the road again for the traveling up to the New York Giants in week 4. So you're going to be without Mark Ingram for those first 4 games. Can Alvin Kamara take on the load of a number 1 back? He hasn't done it at this point throughout. I mean, he's only played 1 professional season, but even his collegiate career at Tennessee, he was never a featured back. He was always an all-purpose weapon or shared time in the backfield. And you look at the carries last year, Ingram wound up with 230 carries from the back, 230 rushes. Kamara was second on the team with 120. And if anybody's curious, Trey Edmonds was the number 3 back. If you take out the once Adrian Peterson was traded, Trey Edmonds had only 9 carries. So we'll get into the experience behind them in a minute. But Sean, do you see Kamara having the ability to take on the number 1 back role without a timeshare, for lack of a better term?
I do. Do I think he's able, capable, you fill in the blank? That remains to be seen. You're not talking about a college game. You're talking about you're playing against the very best in the universe at what they do. And he's never had to shoulder that load alone. Ingram has. And you think back to that Atlanta game last year, it wasn't Ingram that went down, it was Kamara that went down. So Ingram came in and it went the way that it went. Ingram has never been in a position where he had to shoulder that load. I think that you very well may have to tailor make your game plan to allow for maybe that lack of experience and feel your way through it. You're going to have to see through your OTAs, through your mini camps, through your training camp, through your preseason games. You're going to have to see just exactly what Kamara is prepared to do and handle that accordingly.
Now, how about where else will they go? You know you're going to be without Mark for the first 4 games. You know Kamara is going to be your starter, your number 1 back. Those 2 things are without question at this point. But looking at the running backs that the Saints have on the roster right now, real quick, we already mentioned Trey Edmonds, who had 9 carries, making the team as an undrafted free agent last year. They signed Jonathan Williams, pulled him off the Denver Broncos practice squad, originally drafted in 2016 from the Bills. He has 27 career carries. You have Daniel Lasco, who was drafted by the Saints in 2016, coming off a really bad injury last year that caused him to miss the majority of the season. But he's more of a special team back. And then you have Mr. Boston Scott, drafted in the 6th round from Louisiana Tech this year. That's who the Saints have on the roster right now under contract. And then bringing in a couple of undrafted free agents to try out at camp this weekend. Some of the rumors have had the Saints, are they going to pursue another veteran free agent running back, or are they just going to roll with what they have? Can you talk a little bit, Sean, about A, what your feelings are about where you think they'll go, and B, educate some of the people, the names that we just ran down, they're certainly inexperienced, what you think that they'll bring to the Saints roster?
Trey Edmonds is more, he's not, I got to be careful here. He has some very big brothers. I don't want to offend. I've seen them. Trey Edmonds is not going to be your 20 to 30 carry type of running back. He's more of a between the tackles bruiser, in my opinion. I don't think that he's even equipped to handle. You put Kamara in the Ingram role, he's not even the player that you're going to throw over into the Kamara role. You mentioned Louisiana Tech Bulldog, Boston Scott. Boston strong, baby. I'm sorry, got to rep my team. Boston was, in my opinion, as much as I love the kid, as much promise as I've seen in him throughout his career, he was brought in to be a special teams player and possibly work his way up from there, in my opinion. But don't go to sleep on this young man. He runs, I think, like a 4.4, 4.6, somewhere in that neighborhood, 40. He's bigger than Darren Sproles was when he played for the Saints. This kid played in the Superdome before. He played in the New Orleans Bowl for the Bulldogs, and I think the last time he was there, he finished the game with 100 carries. A pretty good average. But he also played special teams as well.
Well, and a lot of the immediate comparisons when Boston was drafted were to Darren Sproles. Size. I had a little bit of film on Boston, and he, as far as playing style goes, maybe he has a similar wiggle to him than what Sproles had. But Boston looks like he can run between the tackles. He was asked to do so his senior year at Louisiana Tech, which was his first year really in a featured back role. And obviously running between the tackles at the college level and the pro level are two different things. But he looks like his style of play is closer to a pure running back than what we had in Sproles. Would you agree?
I completely agree. You know, I never argued it, but when it comes to comparing Boston Scott to Darren Sproles, I never really got that. To me, the one player above all that Scott always reminded me of, going back to the first time I saw him on the field with Tech, was Pierre Thomas. He had kind of style. He was never going to run off center and just roll over a middle linebacker. He will and leave reaching. So he always Pierre for some reason. If that would be accurate or not, but always.
Well, and that's probably, and people forget that Pierre Thomas was not exactly a big back himself. So that's I hadn't thought about that. That's probably a pretty good comparison. You mention what you said about the tight ends real quick? You can't really think bringing in and is in Hill and Toe necessarily see them going for a tight end, at least until they see what they have from these undrafted free agents. Do you see a similar situation with the running backs? I mean, we're talking about a handful of late-round draft picks here, all inexperienced. So do you see a similar situation with that, or do you see them bringing in a veteran back before?
Honestly, the rumors all day today, as you have about Alfred Morris. Is there any other Cowboys cast-offs that I've forgotten? Well, Jonathan Williams played for the Cowboys, didn't he? We've met our Cowboy quota. Leave us alone. really doing that will not happen because about this time a year ago, I made the comment that there is no way that the New Orleans, well, actually a little bit before this last year, I said there's absolutely that the New Orleans Saints are going to some. I was on that. Just for the record, there was an instance several years before that someone approached me and asked me, okay, it's the big controversy. Tell us what you think. Peyton Manning or Ryan? I would ever twice on Sunday before I would ever think about drafting Peyton Manning. So I'm man enough to admit that I was stupid when I was younger.
Well, I'll go you one further. I can't remember, but last year I was vocal about my displeasure with their selection of Brian Ramczyk in the first round. So that tells you how smart I have been in my
people always ask, and Bob, you know exactly, we've talked about this before. People always ask us what we think. Well, we're just like anybody. We give you an opinion based on the information that we're presented with, and nobody wants offensive tackle in the first. The following season, whenever that pick looks like it was the pick of the draft, then it's a good idea. But you talk close.
Couldn't help. And I need a place to pat myself back. That we're releasing a piece on tomorrow morning. A young kid had he was drafted to the Dearness Johnson. We have a player profile coming out on him. So given the Saints' history of doing very well, especially in the Sean Payton era with undrafted running backs, we might not want to discount kids like Dearness or Boston Scott in the later. Ray Edmonds stepping up into a more prominent role here.
And theoretically speaking, if you can take what you have and make that void, much better off. Maybe Scott so much, but you got Edmonds, you've got Lasco, guys that have been in the system 1 year, 2 years, however long thus far. If you can make be all levels for this team, this is where the big boys play, and it doesn't always work that way.
But you're absolutely, folks, this is not a season-long suspension. It's not an injury, and I'm looking around for a piece of wood to knock on. This is not an injury that's going to keep Ingram out 8 or 10 games. This is 4 games. 4 games on a New Orleans Saints team that is more player. Sit here and say, on my own, I want that to be true. You said there's no real reason not to roll with the pieces that you have because they're on your team to begin with because you think that they can play. If you're going to operate like most professional teams do, if you're going to operate with the next man up philosophy, well, this is really no different. This is the exact same. If you had a guy, turn an ankle and was going to miss 2, okay, and I kind of feel that that's the way the Saints are going to play it too. At least see what they have with these young, inexperienced guys, and then sit down as a coaching staff and say, okay, we need to go get someone for a little bit of support till Mark gets back.
And I think it's worth mentioning, worth considering. You also have other little piece in your chest set there named Drew Brees that has done a hell of a lot more with a hell of a lot less than just losing Mark Ingram. You know, like focus is going to be missing. Is Mark what this team does? You saw that a year ago. Mark Ingram's the bruiser. Mark Ingram is everybody expects him not to be. You know, but he did in this offense a year ago put us a long way towards that 11-5 season that we had and divisional appearance in the playoffs. Can we do it without him? That remains to be seen. Alluded to earlier. It bears noting also that, you know, those 4 games that he's going to be out in a very hotly contested NFC South division. 2 of those games are division that actually could matter December.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard some people say, "Well, the first 4 games look easy except for Atlanta," and you shake your head. And against Tampa Bay, which Ramsey record last season and played below expectations, but the brand new season. Still a divisional rival, and the divisional games are always the toughest on your schedule. And number 3, New Orleans, and a very important December year.
Yeah, that's the only one behind. And that was saw the end of in the emergency room with my 5-year. Yeah, that. But anyway, topic there. People us to take South Crown again, and the reality of probably going to be a rude awakening for some people. I don't think, and Bob, there again, you and I have discussed this at great length. I don't think that there's a division in this league at this time and I mean, even several years that has been more hotly contested and more competitive than the NFC South. Up until last year, your last 2 Super Bowl losers came from the NFC South. And the Super Bowl losers was because they weren't the New Orleans Saints. But, you know, I digress.
Somewhere in the back of my brain, the 28-3 are bouncing around, but I don't know why.
I just want to hear Chicago get up and perform their song, and instead of it being 25 or 6-4, they just can say 28-3. When they do that, I'm going to retire.
Get out your crystal. You see, we know Mark Ingram is going to miss the first 4 games. His representatives we're talking about this morning has already been heard and denied. So there's really no direction for him to go except take your medicine and come back hopefully strong. But we've talked about he's in a contract here. We've talked about the trade rumored, et cetera, et cetera. Get out your crystal ball. Tell me what you see. Tell us what you see happens with Mark Ingram for the remainder of this year, and is he a New Orleans Saint beyond that?
Wow. What do I see if for the rest of this season? When you ask me that, Bob, you know from being on our show, everything is a movie scene. And the movie scene that immediately jumped to my mind when you asked me that was that scene in Rocky III where Mr. T looks at this camera and goes, pain, Ingram is mean. He is going to be angry, and he is going to run thusly. I don't look for him to miss a beat and to come back bigger, badder, stronger, and meaner. And quite simply put, to be totally honest, I don't look for him to have a job beyond this season. As far as the way, if how the New Orleans Saints handle the Mark Ingram deal should depend on how Mark Ingram handles this season. Sean Payton could have chucked it in on Ingram several times already, but he didn't. He stuck with his guy. He ultimately cut Saints legend in Pierre Thomas to keep Ingram. And if you look at the stats, there wasn't that big a disparity between the two. But, I get the move because you're looking at the future of your organization, not the past. And unfortunately for Mark Ingram, that future, it's not the Ingram forever. I can't see that playing out, because just like we're going to find out with Michael Thomas at the end of this season, sooner or later you're going to have to pay Kamara some money, and you're not the type of organization to be able to pay huge contracts to a Mark Ingram and an Alvin Kamara and a Michael Thomas. The list just goes on. Sooner or later, you're going to have to re-up on Cam Jordan. And that goes right back a little while ago. This is a business, and it has to be approached in that light. And, it's supposed to be a level playing table with the salary cap and all this and all that. But, New Orleans is not a team that's going to be able to have all these high-priced superstars on their team. And you may be looking at the end of the Ingram era in New Orleans. I would prefer to think that it's not that way, that Ingram will finish his career as a New Orleans Saint, much the same as I feel about Drew Brees, Cam Jordan. I would love to see these guys finish their career as New Orleans Saints, but the reality of it is that this is a much different game than it was when I grew up, and Terry Bradshaw played his entire career as a Pittsburgh Steeler, and Roger Staubach spent his entire career as a Dallas Cowboy. Those type of players are just few and far between these days because the game is so much more of a business now.
You're right. And there's a couple things about Mark Ingram. Folks, he's a competitor. I agree with you, Sean. I think he's going to come back strong. There's no reason to believe that he won't come back strong. He's a hard runner. He has been a good teammate to those guys. And Sean Payton was the one that in the first round. He traded up to get him, if I'm not mistaken. He favored Ingram over Pierre Thomas. He favored Ingram over Chris Ivory. He favored Ingram over Kyrie Robinson. And some people might sit there and think to yourself, well, of course, look at Kyrie's stats after he left New Orleans, or Ivory had a good run. But think back to 2012 and 2013. Ingram was the leading rusher on those teams, but it wasn't by much. He shared a lot of backfield carries with those names that we just mentioned. And Sean Payton knew what he had in Mark, and he must have liked him, because when it came down to decision of which running back do I keep, because we've got to pay other players too, he always kept Ingram. But I do agree with you also that I think when it comes to, forget all the Mark Ingram is going to be traded talk. I don't think that that's even an issue. Who knows if it ever was, but it certainly isn't now. Ingram will be a New Orleans Saint through the remainder of this season. And then who knows? They'll probably try to sit down with his representatives. But we've talked over and over and over again about how young this team is and how many guys are all around the same age and about the same tenured in the league. Well, that's a double-edged sword because that means that a very talented team is growing up together, but it also means that they're all going to need to get paid at the same time. And when it comes down to numbers crunching, do you pay a Mark Ingram when you already have an Alvin Kamara in your backfield and you know you're going to have to pay a Michael Thomas, a Ryan Ramczyk, a Cam Jordan, a Marshawn Lattimore, et cetera? The list goes on and on. So I think it comes down to business. And I don't think that any of us can really look beyond this year. It's fun to get the crystal ball out. Kyle, are you still with us? Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
I put
here,
him
guys.
to sleep.
No, I am here.
Sorry. I was going to ask you if you were looking into your crystal ball and how you feel about what we had just said.
Say that one more time.
How do you see Ingram coming back from this suspension? And do you see him in a New Orleans Saints uniform beyond 2018?
Wow, good question. No, I do not see him back with the team. I would be very surprised, and I say this with a heavy heart because I really have been pulling for Mark since he became a Saint and gone through some of his trials and tribulations. But I think the writing is on the wall. And if we know anything about Sean Payton and the way he makes his decisions, if these guys have already started to shop him around and it's telling us that they do not want him back, or they may have already decided how they're going to proceed on without him. So I don't know what's going to happen when he does get back, if he'll have enough time to demonstrate to some other suitors out there in the NFL his abilities. Well, we know his abilities, but, around the fourth game, fifth game, sixth game, will that be enough time for them to put in a trade before the deadline? So it's one of these things where we need him in order to make a push for the Super Bowl, but I don't know if Peyton and those guys are going to be patient enough to be able to say, let's keep Mark on board. I hope I'm wrong, but I've seen these scenarios before, and we never thought they would get rid of Sproles. We never thought they would get rid of Graham the way they did, but, this organization always seems to shock us, right?
Always.
Very
I'm
true.
on blood pressure medication because I watch New Orleans Saints football. Not to mention the heavy drinking involved with covering the New Orleans Saints draft.
Yeah.
We traded up to number 14, and I poured one because I could hear them saying Lamar Jackson, and I was going, I cannot hear this sober. No, I make jokes. But, I to be totally honest with you, Bob, and I thought of this while Kyle was giving his response, I consider it to be two different scenarios, if you want to call it that, whether a team is actively shopping a player or if they're in a position where they say, hey, they get a phone call, hey, we want to talk to you about possibly cutting a deal to get Ingram. Well, we'll listen to anything. I consider that to be two different points of view and positions to be in. Now, you never you never want to not listen when somebody's willing to talk a deal.
Right.
Am I wrong in thinking that?
No, I completely agree with you. And Kyle and I were sort of talking about that exact thing also a little earlier, and with the reports that were coming out that the Saints were quote unquote shopping Ingram. Again, like you pointed out, shopping to what extent? I mean, every single NFL team takes phone calls and makes phone calls. Hey, what would you take for this player? Or, hey, what do you think about this kind of deal? That's just shop talk. That goes on every single day with every single team, I suspect. Would I call that actively shopping him? No, I wouldn't. Actively shopping is, I guess, what we saw out of the Brandon Cooks situation a couple years back, where, a lot of us, and I'll raise my hand and include myself in this, we had blinders on, and there's no way in hell that they're going to move from Cooks after the season he just had and the receiving core that they just had. Well, I was wrong, and obviously looking back on that situation, they were actively shopping him. So is it
that's
that
one
kind
of the few things that you and I have disagreed on, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm a man enough to admit when I'm wrong.
I remember you and I having that conversation because I told you after that Los Angeles Rams game, I told you that there's no way you can bring him back in the locker room. And when I said that, everybody just kind of blew it off. Oh, shut up. He's part of this team. And then in the off season, he made the comments that he did. And I said, look, you cannot put a poison in the locker room. And everybody just kind of rolled their eyes at me. And, next thing you know, he's a Patriot.
And now a Ram after 1 year with New England. So that might tell you a little bit about Mr. Brandon Cooks, too.
Sure. These guys that are, and I'll use this term loosely, these guys that are deemed as franchise players, and you see them go from team to team to team to team. There's a reason that happens. And it's not because they're so mistreated and so misunderstood and so misused and taken advantage. No, there's this is a bit that's the recurring theme tonight, I suppose. This is a business, and if you don't handle your business the right way, you're not going to work with the same employer for very long.
Very true.
Yeah. And I have to concur with you on that, Sean. Look, guys, Sean Payton has a short fuse, right? And he has and he's very short with his patience on bad behavior. Think about AP, first game, Monday Night Football, when he was yelling at Sean Payton, I said, he ain't going to be here long. You just knew it. You just knew he was not going to be with this team for any longer, right? And, I remember the professor, and God bless, today is his 52nd birthday, heavenly birthday, professor, my man. But look, he and I used to talk, and he was like, why in the world is Jimmy Graham flying these planes? Sean Payton, he's not going to be cool with him flying these planes. And there was more to it also, as far as that battle they had with his compensation as well, right? Look, anytime there's a hint of someone doing something that could be contrary to what the direction of the team is, that he has in his vision for the team, they're gone. And Bill Belichick is like that. Bill Parcells was like that, remember? Guys, think about it. So Sean Payton, and look, I was reading something about the drug policy. Man, look, when you get to the 4-game suspension, you had a couple of violations, and you had a warning, and you had another little violation where they took your paycheck. Okay, so when you get to a 4-game suspension, you had a couple little strikes, guys. You know,
that's right.
This is not, and that's why it's difficult for me to say if he's not a rookie, if he's not a second-year player, that he just didn't know, or anyone just didn't know, right? And I read Deuce's his Twitter spat that he was having with Beck. You know, Deuce was saying he didn't know what was in his supplement, and it was plausible, and they won their case. But you know, still, man, there's too much information out there for you not to know, in my opinion. That's all I have to say.
And when your paycheck is riding on knowing or not knowing, you very well better know what you're putting into your body. And you know that at any given point in the process, you can be randomly checked.
Right, right.
You don't know, shame on you.
Isn't that what your trainers, as well as the quality control guy, as well as the dietitian, as well as the physicians, and there's quite a few people on the staff that helps these guys to keep them in line. Just like what you were saying earlier, Sean, as far as having somebody as a compliance officer, you have several different compliance officers in an NFL locker room. You have that already. And look, I don't know what happened or didn't happen. I still support Mark Ingram, but I do know when you've got to say, I messed up. I had to do it in my lifetime, you know, as an employer as well as an employee. If I mess up, I messed up. So, you know, do we just take the lumps and go with it? And I still think he has enough time until the 16th, until they do the final rendering of the final verdict, I should say, from the arbitrator. But it seems to me that it's pretty cut in stone, and this is the direction the NFL is going to go into, that it's going to be a 4-game suspension. And then he's going to lose, a paycheck or two, $1 million as far as the player bonus or whatever. So that's a huge loss. So I know he's not happy.
I'm sorry, go on, Kyle.
Go ahead. I know he's not happy. Go ahead.
Oh, no, definitely not happy. That's what I thought, too, that they were going through an arbitrator and another appeal, and then a decision would be made on May 16th. But Nick Underhill reported, it was only about maybe an hour or so before we hit the air, Nick Underhill said that the NFL has already heard that appeal, rendered their decision, and that it upheld. So I think at this point, assuming Nick is correct, and Nick Underhill is one of the better reporters out there to be sure, there's no reason to believe that Nick would report anything that's not true. So at least I'm operating under the assumption Mark Ingram is going to be missing the first 4 games.
Look, it was a done deal. They knew about it. Sean Payton and those guys knew about it. I'm serious, and I'm going to stand by this, guys, Sean and Bob. That's why they were shopping. And yes, they may have been fielding calls, and they may have been making calls, but he was on the market, point blank.
Well, you know, I wouldn't doubt that in any way, shape, form, or fashion, because as we are reminded in this business every season, it is every bit and getting to be more so by the day. This is very, very much a "what have you done for me lately" league.
Yes.
You see players like Des Bryant. You can say what you want to about the attitude, about the idiocy, about the jerk. But, you know, when you get right down to it, Des Bryant was not delivering on the field. so they cut him loose. And you know, if you're not at least making the team money that they're paying you, they're not gonna sit around and wait for very long for you to do that. Des Bryant has got, and I know this is a Saints podcast, and I'm going off on a rabbit hole here, but Des Bryant's going to find out real quick just exactly how great an employer he had in Jerry Jones, because Jerry Jones is one of maybe 3 owners in this entire league that would put up with the BS that is Des Bryant and his circus show that his life is. And now his age is becoming a factor in it as well. So don't be at all surprised if he does play, if it's for any more than league minimum.
Yeah, a 1-year deal. Yeah, you're right.
Uh-huh. Oh, and one last thing about Ingram, too, and I don't think any of the 3 of us have mentioned this. We talked about what a gray area the quote-unquote substance policy is in the NFL. And I can kind of, without looking at the NFL specifically, I played many years as a volleyball player, and if I played in a pro-am sanctioned tournament, we were issued a very lengthy list of things that we could not use. And I'll give you one quick example. Regular over-the-counter nasal spray carries a substance in it that will test as a banned substance, at least in the volleyball circuit. Now,
it's amphetamine.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it could be something as simple as that. But the bottom line is this. Like you said, Kyle, every NFL team has compliance officers. The league has a compliance department. Whatever the NFL policy is, it's still set in ink. At the end of the day, Mark Ingram is responsible for what Mark Ingram puts in Mark Ingram's body. And he's a 28-year-old man, will be 29 in December. At the end of the day, he has to look in the mirror and say, nobody tricked me into doing this. Nobody shoved anything in my mouth when I was asleep. I put this in my body. I have people around me that maybe could have told me it was wrong, but I'm responsible for my actions, and my actions cost me 4 games of an NFL paycheck.
Amen.
Totally agree with that.
Amen.
Totally agree with that.
I agree as well. Look, guys, I'm just going to end my thought about Mark. Mark can come back. If Mark comes back, that 5th game, the Redskins game, comes back, gets into the field, improves his worth, and helps the team win, Sean is going to support you. But if you're going to be a consistent problem, Sean is going to jettison you. That's it. And I don't know no other way to say it.
You'll see that verdict very quickly.
Very quickly. You're right.
Any doubt to that, all you have to do is look back a year ago to Willie Snead. Willie came back from his suspension out of shape. Of course, as Bob and I have discussed at length, I never bought into the hamstring injury. He come back, and rumors abound as to the state that he came back in. But the bottom line is, you had a less than 100 yards from a 1,000-yard receiver the year prior, and he caught, 6 passes last year?
Yeah.
8, but yeah.
Perplexing year for Willie Snead, man. Look, and not only that, Sean, I think it's something more to Willie's situation versus just not – it wasn't just an injury like you said as well. It was something else that happened with Willie that we were not privy to.
There was, in my humble opinion, there was something there that caused Peyton to look at him in a different way. And, at the end of the day, right, wrong, or in the middle, Sean Payton getting paid depends on whether or not he wins football games. And if Adolf Hitler could run a seam route, Peyton would put him on the field and tell him to catch it. Personal feelings aside, Sean Payton's not going to take a loss just to make a point with a guy.
Right.
This team, just like all other 31 teams, they're about winning. That's how they're judged at the end of the day. You can be a fantastic guy in the community. If you're not winning ball games, you're not going to have a job for very long.
That's right. That's what my wife told me.
Mine too.
Mine too. It's unanimous across the board.
All right, guys. Oh man. Well,
Sean, tell everybody. First of all, Sean, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope it's going to be the first of numerous appearances on our brand new show. But truly was honored to have you on as our special guest tonight. Tell everybody how they can find you.
You can follow me on Facebook at Under the Dome Podcast. We have our own page, and you can follow me on Twitter either at Under the Dome PO1 or at Drew's Dad 3721. And I try to respond to everything that's sent to me. And if you guys will allow me the opportunity, thank you so much for having me on the show. I've followed Bob from the very beginning, and as I alluded to earlier, I can't express in words properly and accurately just how proud it makes me to see Bob ascending to the heights that he has. And Bob, you're like a younger brother to me, and I'm so proud of you, man. Thank you so much. I'm honored and quite humbled to be a part of what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mosley, would you do us the honors of taking us out this evening and telling us how people can find you and our wonderful show?
All right, guys, you can go to saintspodcast.com. You can also have a listen to Alan and Sean on the Under the Dome. We host their podcast on that website as well, so you can check us out there. You can always check us out at www.saintsnews.net 24/7, all the latest of Saints news around the clock. But you can also look at our featured columnist, Mr. Barry Hurst, the man from Harahan. He is going to give you his best featured articles on a daily basis at www.saintsnewsnetwork.com. And if you are a writer out there, you would like to participate and come on board with the Saints News Network, we will be glad to have you for the 2018 season. So you can just check us out or email me at kmosley@saintsnews.net. And you can always check us out at Saints News on Twitter, Instagram, and on our Facebook page.
Sounds great. I think we had a wonderful show yet again this evening, and thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us. And please, like both Sean and Kyle said, and I will third that for sure. Reach out to us. Reach out to us on these social networks. We love to talk football. We love to talk our New Orleans Saints. And we like to get your thoughts too. This is, as Kyle points out all the time, we're all just one big family. So everybody's opinion is equally important. But thank you so much again, Kyle, for helping me through tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you again, Sean, for joining us. And
yay,
thank you for all
Sean! Yay.
Oh, and by the way, Kyle, you're pretty cool too. I didn't want to leave you out there.
Oh man, thank you, man. Thank you so much.
To be appearing on Under the Dome in the near future.
All right, I'm gonna have my green screen in front of my face.
Okay.
That's not fair. If my face, which is perfect for radio, if my face has to appear, so does yours.
Man, Bob came on our show from his car, running red lights, smoking cigarettes. I feared for his life, but when we said we were going live, he joined us.
He was there. Look, man, you guys invite me.
Never miss a deadline.
If you guys invite me, let me know. If I have it in the schedule, I will be there. Trust me. Okay.
Well, just as soon as we can work the logistics out, brother, you're on. You have an open invitation.
You know what, guys, will be great if we had like a Saints News as well as Under the Dome simulcast. That would be awesome, man. A simulcast,
I would love that.
like for the beginning of the season or a kickoff special simulcast, or something new, something that hasn't been done before. Let's think about that. Let's kick that idea around.
Well, we got 4 or 5 months now to figure out the logistics on that.
Yeah, man, that might be cool. We can do that.
Hey, I'm all for promoting the brand, brother.
There you go. All right, Bob. So, guys, don't forget, check us out on the web at www.saintspodcast.com. And Bob Rose, how can people follow you?
Well, people can follow me. I think I'm back on Facebook for the long term after a couple of Facebook assassinations. But I can be followed up.
I don't know what time is it.
It's hard to tell. But I can be followed on Facebook under Bob Rose, and I am a member of the Saints News Network on there, as well as the Under the Dome page. Also, so I'm fairly easy to find. On Twitter, you can follow me at BobbyR2613, where I'll post my articles, as well as replays of our shows that we do. Put those up Thursday as soon as possible. And you can follow Canal Street Chronicles, too, at Saint CSC, where not only my work will be up there, but the work of my truly wonderful editor, Mr. John Hendricks, and a number of other talented writers, a couple of whom we're trying to get on our show here. So there's a lot of great content coming from there as well. So thank you guys again for tuning in and making us what we are.
Awesome, man. You guys have a great night. And who dat, baby?
Who dat?
All right. Take care.